think that there's a difference between kind of rewarding failure and creating like self-confidence and drive.
Welcome to Clicks and Bricks Podcast. We talk about the entrepreneur mindset.
If you get one shot at this, what kind of shot are you going to take?
If we forget who we are, they're going to forget who you are.
And you've got an adversity story that's out of this world.
Everything from that Main Street brick and mortar to that billion-dollar manufacturer.
David, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from? Just a basic introduction to the audience real quick.
Perfect. So David Wald, co-founder, CEO of Aclaimant, grew up actually in Okemos, Michigan, which is right outside of East Lansing, like Michigan State area. No one's ever heard of it. And then courtesy of University of Michigan, ended up in Chicago. So, I've been doing Aclaimant now since about 2014. And prior to this, spent part of my life as a management consultant with Bain & Company. And then I actually was fortunate enough to join up with the guys who did Groupon to join their venture fund when it first started off, the Light Bank Fund in Chicago. So I was an investor there for a handful of years. Did a stint
that had to end up pretty well.
Yeah, it was weird to be like with the guys who did Groupon in their venture fund pre-IPO days, because if you can imagine, like everybody wanted some of the Groupon magic. So like the number of deals that came inbound when we were there was insane. I mean, I've never seen anything. Like we probably did 2 deals a week for like 2 years. And it was almost all stuff that was just coming in. I was like, oh my God, Groupon's the greatest thing ever. Like we got to get some of that magic rubbed off on us. It was wild. It was a ton of fun.
Yes, absolutely. Groupon was a huge hit, right? So being on the ground floor of that had to have been just a ton of experience and fun.
Oh yeah. I mean, seeing like everything that they tried, like kind of even like how to create a space was, I think, probably the most interesting thing about it, because we were liaising with the founders, Eric and Brad, like every day as part of their venture fund, and just hearing how they could like take that experience. I don't know if everyone knows, they actually had started, that's their 4th or 5th really successful venture. So they did, I think they own like 3 or 4 public companies, maybe it might be 5 now. Right. No one's heard of the first 3. But like you can kind of just like follow the path of like they learn something here and they apply to here and they just got really good at like doing a couple things really well. Right. And they kind of carved out these spaces. It's awesome. And they kind of build these things at scale. Like, you're going to walk around that building in 600 West Chicago. I mean, it is like crazy boiler room. You walk in, you see the dashboard, you see people who are making phone calls. It's got an energy unlike anything I've ever seen.
That's amazing.
It was great to be a part of. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and then Groupon, and then you keep moving forward, right?
That's the plan, right? So the guys there made an investment in a company called tastytrade.com. It was content and technology for active investors. So I joined there as the first employee. That business grew up to be about 100, 150 people. They were doing really well. And then at the same time, of all people, my current father-in-law, but at the time, my girlfriend's dad approached me with an idea for a business. He's like, hey, I've been in insurance for 35 years. I want to build an app. Do you want to help me? And my response was, dear God, no. Just because, right? Like that's his girlfriend's father business. Like nothing good happens out of that conversation.
Right.
And of course, one thing led to another. And the more I talked to him about what was going on, what he was doing, the more I was like, oh my God, I can't believe this is like a real thing. How is nobody doing this? And so we just kind of jumped in head first off the diving board, and 8 years later, 60 people, Series B funded business, and the rest is history.
Fantastic. And it's Aclaimant is the current business that you're operating.
Yes.
I read a little bit about it. Risk assessment, is that the crux of everything for Aclaimant, or can you give us a little bit deeper dive into that?
Yeah. So the risk assessment's part of it, but the biggest problem we're trying to solve is that most companies don't do a good enough job at keeping people safe and dealing with things that go wrong. And so the part of the business who's responsible for that is stuck in like 1985 or 1990. So whether you're talking about Amazon or any of the crazy big companies or any legacy company you've ever heard of, they have people who are doing these crazy things with drones and videos and AI sensors and all this stuff. But the people whose job it is to make sure that truck keeps moving, the business keeps coming along, are still trying to chase down like, oh, Ken, I heard you cut your arm off at the workshop. Here's the form to go ahead and fill out. Or like, right. We should do a paper assessment. And so what we kind of realized was if you can actually help businesses build a digital infrastructure and kind of move the risk management part of that business into the future, you can unlock so many key components of value, all by helping businesses become better risks from the inside out. So the technology itself is a workflow platform that really helps companies become safer, control insurance claims and costs, and just make that whole really painful process simple, smooth, and easy.
Right. I am shocked whenever I'm dealing with businesses at how many companies, when we talk about just basic risk assessment, have zero knowledge of even how to do a risk assessment, from, probability to impact, and, how to score those. It's absolutely crazy. And for this episode, I'm going to throw my worksheet on how I do risk assessments in this comment. And it's absolutely free for people to download because it's important, right? Most things fall in that moderate risk area, and you can go ahead and move forward. But very few things are that catastrophic and a high probability. But I find it very interesting that 90% of the companies that I talk to, unless they're over 5 million revenue with over 50 employees, have zero knowledge of even how to do a risk assessment. Is that pretty common for you too?
And what you would think is crazy is you would think that'd be a threshold, but we talk about companies that are our customers, 100 million in revenue, billion in revenue, 10 billion in revenue, like people who are literally moving tens of thousands of people and billions of dollars of assets. And you're saying, wait, if there's a gas leak, you document it on a paper form? Like, what if it doesn't make it to the office to be fixed? Like true story. Like we had a customer that had a chemical leak that was documented in our system, and thankfully it got taken care of right away. The alert went out to the right person. They came back and kind of found it. But we've seen similar things like that go or get missed, that actually do things like cause life-altering explosions. And so for us, just the fact that like you can have people who are doing all this crazy stuff that's so cool in their core business, but just forget the fact that, like, listen, people get hurt in the job. Like, it's a real thing. Like, insurance costs tons of money and actually can put certain businesses out of business. And if you aren't on top of that, like, it'll be on top of you, especially in today's day and age when just the world has got so many crazy things happen to it every single day.
Absolutely. So a little bit of risk assessment, a lot of process, and some governance in there, right? I've also find it amazing at how many businesses have zero governance, right? Oh, who does your accounting? Bobby does my accounting. Okay, when she's done, who checks it? Well, nobody. Bobby just does it, right? And so do you add in the financial risk and the physical risk all inside your app and process for that?
So we primarily characterize our space as physical risk management. So we're dealing with workplace injuries, accidents, illnesses, third-party injuries, accidents on site, property, auto, and other kind of related exposures. Right. And the things then, part of it is then the safety and prevention. So how do I make sure I'm doing everything every day to make sure nothing goes wrong? The risk assessment, the incident management, how do I deal with things that have gone wrong, working through both the compliance and reporting boxes, and then also the best practices, and then liaising with the insurance ecosystem. So I need to report a claim. How to make sure it goes the right way? How do I make sure I'm doing all the little things that make sure that this claim that should be $5,000 doesn't turn into 50 or 500? The craziest thing that we find, the easiest comparable, right, is as an individual person, right? If I was to work out every day, eat well, right, get 8 hours sleep at night, like limit drugs, alcohol, smoking, do everything my doctor says I should, brush my teeth every day, multiple times, all that good stuff, right? That I over time, like if you found 1,000 people like me, the number of times that we end up in the hospital for anything going wrong would be way less than someone who had the reverse opposite profile. 2 hours a night, partying until 8 in the morning, eating nothing but steak 5 meals a day. The same thing holds true for businesses, where like if you find businesses that are doing all the right things, right, they're making sure their employees are safe, they're documenting behaviors, they're getting on top of claims and calling up saying, hey, Ken, I heard you got hurt. Like, how can I help you get back to work? What's going on? Are you okay? Like little stuff like that makes crazy differences, like 7-8-figure bottom line per year differences in businesses that are on top of it versus not, by simply just making sure that everything happens the right way every time and consistently. It blows my mind.
Yeah, and I think where it falls apart, or at least where I've seen it fall apart, is, in any single process, especially when you're dealing with humans and injury and their mindset, the process is, you think it's, they got injured, they went to the doctor, they got the report, but they can open feedback loops at any time. So literally every single incident has an unlimited number of variables. That's got to be somewhat complicated software to write and manage. So I can see why that's hard to do on pen and paper.
Oh yeah, and on top of that, we always think about it as like the ideal end state, right? Is closed loop feedback system. So if Ken gets hurt in the second facility in Memphis, right? I want to figure out why Ken got hurt, and then I want to put in the safety procedures to make sure that we're preventing the same thing from happening again.
Right.
And then conversely, if we're seeing safety procedures fail, I want to know which of those are turning action accidents and how we go ahead and correct and work those things through. And so there's definitely, it's a lot of moving pieces in the system, but then a really kind of thorough job trying to make sure that we can create it, and also more importantly, make it easy, because this is like, it's super nuanced stuff, and it's candidly really annoying to figure out how to do it well. And that's why it's a great software solution, because like it lets the system deal with all the nonsense, and then people focus on just executing the process. Because if you have the good information right off the bat, you can make better decisions, better outcomes, rinse and repeat.
Right. All right. So you went into business with the Aclaimant with your father-in-law. Is that what you said?
Yeah. So at the time, girlfriend's dad at the time, became father-in-law as we kept going.
So fiance's dad comes to you and says, hey, I've got this app idea, and you know how to program. You've got some VC startup experience under your belt. You think it's a bad idea right out of the gate. Tell us about the story about how that goes, and what kind of block and tackle stuff did you guys put into place before you started this now working relationship, or not even working relationship, partner relationship, which is again different than just a working relationship together.
Oh yeah. So if you can imagine, so Mike is my father-in-law. He is 65. He plays hockey 3 days a week with 35-year-olds still.
Way to go.
He's like a lifelong kind of a salesman, kind of all his time spent in the insurance space. So he is, he is relentless in the best possible way. So he kind of wore me down at first over like about 6 months. He's like, I want to build an app. I was like, respectfully, like, I'm not interested. I can't help.
Did he have the concept though, or was he just in his head? I need an app. Oh, he had the concept already. Okay.
He had the concept, right? So he said, okay, that's fine. So he sticks me in a corner, right? So he comes back and says, all right, I went into Chicago. I got 3 quotes from 3 dev shops to build this app. Can you at least look at them for me? Right. So I can't say no, because then I'm like the jerk who's dating his daughter. And if I look at it, like, I know what I'm going to think is, you've worked with dev shops before. Like, if they find an unsuspecting person who has a really big idea, they're going to be like, oh yeah, $500,000, $1 million here. So I read them and I'm like, oh, all right, I'm stuck. All right, these are garbage. Right? It's going to be way too much money. He doesn't know what he's getting into. Like, without someone who knows the process, it's going to be tough. So okay, I have a really good friend.
Even him hiring those without a consult is dangerous.
Yeah, exactly. Because like without having someone to really narrow scope, I mean, you could build endlessly. I mean, we're now 7 years in or 8 years in. It's 22. So we're 8 years in, right? And we're still building. And so I bring in a really smart technologist, a really good friend of mine. Actually, it's our third co-founder, Joel. And I say, all right, Joel will build you the prototype, 90 days, shouldn't be a big deal. Like, just put those away. I'll oversee to make sure that Mike and Joel don't kill each other. Because you can imagine the conversation between an insurance salesman and a developer, like, it's like, it's complete opposite languages. Yeah. And that was where we started. That was 2014. 2014, we kind of started building. And again, it's supposed to be a side project at that point in time.
Right.
And then, like, the first of several miracles happen. Like, in the middle of 2014, we have like this app with a button on a phone. And again, we're still doing this nights and weekends on the side. And we get it in front of CNA, the director of the Fleet Readiness Centers of the Navy, so the guy who manages and oversees all of that, and Kelly Services, the big staffing firm, and of course people who we have no business being in front of, because, like, we're messing around. It's six months of work.
You got an insurance sales guy that can play hockey 3 nights a week. He'll get into some doors. Right.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Right. That's it. And the feedback isn't like, that's cute, guys, go on. It's, how much does this cost? And we should take a look at this, and can we get guys in process? And like, our minds just like, and like, that was really like the key moment that got us going. And then there's a lot more detail behind kind of after that, but that was kind of that first key moment where we kind of went from like, hey, we're messing around here, to like, oh my God, like, there's, we were kind of just basically walking before we ran. And thankfully, we just kind of did in a way where we got to like feel out working together over a pretty long period of time before eventually was our first venture round in 2017.
Right. So what kind of pitfalls, if there's another guy out there dating a girl and father-in-law is really on him to start this business, what kind of pitfalls would you advise him to really, really watch for? Or, is obviously you guys knocked it out of the park. Is there a lot of tension there? Like, I know when you're doing a startup, there's, long hours and sometimes there's budget consciousness stuff. And, how do you have that tension and still have, Christmas morning dinner? Or Christmas morning breakfast, whatever that is, right?
Yeah, right. It's Christmas morning dinner. I like it. But no, I mean, I think it's a great question, right? And I think what's worked really well for Mike and me, and I give him a lot of credit for this, is his personality is kind of leave it all on the table. Like if he thinks you're a moron, he'll call you a moron, right? I'll call him a moron back, right? But it's and I think that the goal, what's working well for us is that we both recognize what we're trying to do, and we both know like the intent of where we're trying to go. And there's complete open honesty and trust. And so like my wife will come yell at us sometimes because like she'll hear me and her father, again, not in front of the team, but one-on-one, like going at it pretty hard. We'll hang up and then we'll go next door and have a drink together.
I love it.
And so the reason why it works is because I think, if he was a very conservative person, if I was kind of very like tight with my words and I fester on stuff, like it would be a complete and utter disaster. But I think the reason why it worked, and actually I think I have the flip experience, which is, for everything that could have gone wrong, like the coolest thing about this is that I managed to build something super special with like my father-in-law and get to know him on a whole different level than I probably ever would have. I mean, I talk to him every single day, probably way too much anyways. But it's one of those things where I think if someone has the opportunity to do it and it makes sense and you have somebody who really wants to go for the ride, like, I think that's nothing. So, the age difference between us is relatively substantial. We speak different languages sometimes, but he still is up at 6 a.m, like kind of ready to jam for everything that we do. I think finding somebody who wants to be in the trenches and kind of going for it, like I think for me it's been awesome. But I think it could have gone a lot of different ways if he was different, if I was different. And if it failed, I mean, listen, I think there's a chance that like this thing could have failed like a number of times along the way. So as long as you're someone who's kind of ready to take that journey together, I think there's definitely pros. There's probably a lot of cons too, but there's definitely some pros to it.
Yeah, I think if on the failure side, what I've seen with some families is the finger pointing stuff, and I don't like that. You got to really make sure that you have those, your ducks in a row and lined out who's responsible for what and who's going to be accountable for what kind of thing. And I think what you said was really interesting, and I have a couple of people in my life like that, where they understand that the conflict is just drive for a better product or service at the end, right? It's not that we are mad at each other. We're both passionate about something, and it tends to get heated. Not everybody has the gumption, I guess is the word, to have those kinds of conversations and then put it to the side, even if you don't come to an agreement, right? Sometimes those actually, I think most of the time they don't come to an agreement at the end, right? It's like, okay, we're going to table this, we're going to go have our cocktail, and then we'll come back to this later, right? Has been my experience in most of those cases, that two passionate minds colliding. If you let it go to the end, you end up with a better product or service at the end, I think, right? The compromise on both sides for the passion, but it's really cool.
No, and I think just to kind of run out on that there's kind of two things to add. One is when I was a venture capitalist, one of the things I saw was actually I was in the room one time when I saw two founders almost get into like a physical altercation because they disagreed about something. And at the time I was like, what are these guys doing? Like this is moronic. And I left and I sat down and I was like, like the reason why they're going to win is if they don't kill each other, that like there's enough passion there to actually do something different and to actually change something. And I think that's what I realized, like, oh my God, to actually win here, like you have to have people that really, really care and really, really wake up every morning, because it is a grind. It's an absolute grind. And there are so many things that go wrong on the way, whereas if you get discouraged at that, if you don't care enough to like get up, like and get in someone's face and yell at them about it, right? Not that you should kind of be mean to people, but like if you don't have that kind of passion behind it, like you probably shouldn't be, an entrepreneur in a startup, because that's what it takes. You're basically jumping into the abyss and being like, don't worry, I'll grow wings and fly. There's ground there somewhere. Like I got this, right? If you don't believe it, you have no shot.
So now I think to run a business and grow something, you have to have some level of aggression, right? And that's kind of what we're talking about right now, is that aggressive. I'm going to make this work. Doesn't matter. I know there's a ton of obstacles. I'm going up big hills and I've got rocks in my shoes, but I'm going to keep going. That takes some aggression and tenacity that a lot of people don't have. And I found that at least today, when I was growing up, that kind of aggressiveness was sought after. It was, what everybody kind of wanted to be. But today it seems like that aggression is almost a negative in a lot of people's minds and talked down to, and you shouldn't be that way. Do you feel that's happening in today's society? Is that a good thing, bad thing? Do you have any opinions on how we're going with this narrative of masculinity as a bad thing?
Yeah, and I think it's it's a great question, and I think we have 3 little kids, and I think what I've found as we're kind of like walking through the oldest one is in kindergarten right now, is that I think that there's a difference between kind of rewarding failure and creating like self-confidence and drive. And I think that, a lot of people are afraid of hurting feelings right now. And there's a bunch of, good reasons for all of those things and kind of creating a very comfortable and inclusive environment. But I think that there's equally an opportunity to create leaders in every environment. And I think that's really where it has to be. And so for me, the things that I look at is in an environment where, again, we're trying to find ways to make sure that no kid falls behind and that nobody feels like, that they're unwelcome. You still have to have an opportunity to create people who have that inner drive, right? Like the desire to do well and the belief that they can. And so I think the way that I think about it is, I think you can actually accomplish both, but you have to do it consciously, right? You have to be still able to make sure that every kid like feels like they're part of something and feels like that they're being included, but at the same time, let them know that like, it's okay to want more. It's okay to want to strive to be the best. And it's okay to challenge yourself and to know that like, you won't always win. And so like an example, right? I play chess with my son. He's 5. I was a big chess player growing up. And, every once in a while, like I'll make sure that I beat him pretty badly. Right. And I'll do it because, I think it's important for him to understand that like, he still has a ways to go, but then also we'll teach him along the way and then we'll let him win sometimes too. And I think giving him the confidence that like he can win, but he doesn't win every time. And that when you lose, you have to be able to learn from losing, right? I think that's the other big thing is if you don't know how to lose, like you can never really win. And in a startup, like you get your butt kicked all the time. Like everything breaks all the time. You're always losing. So, I think kind of trying to reinforce those lessons along the way, I think kind of really, really is important too.
Yeah. And I think the narrative of toxic masculinity, I think masculinity just is being redefined right now, right? That the perception of aggressive and drive it's not stepping on people or running people over, right? It's generally the intent is to lift people up with you. And if you can make that transition on what you think that aggressiveness is, I think that's a really healthy place to be. And I don't disagree with some of the narrative, right? It was probably my opinion of 20 years ago, it was way more abusive, right? There was not it was not nearly as nice as today. So it is a better environment. Now, Groupon, you were around there in the startup days. You've been through a couple of startups. How many employees does Aclaimant have today?
So today we're about 60. 60.
So on that transition, and I know where my favorite numbers are because I've been from, the first employee as well, for companies that I was managing up to 700. Where's your favorite place to be on employee headcount? Like that sweet spot.
Yeah. So it's funny. I think my 2 favorite times, and I know you asked for one, I'll give you 2. My favorite time was when we had 7, like really, really in the early beginning, just because it was like everybody was in the room together. We had no idea what we were doing, and like magic, like it was like pure magic was happening. Like, and we found us situations where like, oh my God, like I have a call with insert crazy company name. Like, what are we going to sell them? Like, I don't know. What do we have? What can I show them? Is it ready? No, the code's done in 5 minutes. The meeting's in the 6. Okay, perfect. Let's do it. Like that for me was a ton of fun. And actually, like I love where we're at right now. It just feels like there's so many good things that are happening, and we're kind of right at that inflection point where we're like, We built it. The customers love it. It's working. And now everything feels like it's like starting to shake as like we're going from 0 to 600 and like you can just feel it and people are coming in. So, I think if I could parachute in, I'd go from like 0 to 7, then jump to 60, and then just like go run from there. The middle part is hard because you're trying to like figure out how what you're doing works, how to scale it, how to package it, how to convince the market it's a real thing, building that adoption cycle. But once you get back then, you start to feel the lift. Oh my God, it's unbelievable.
Well, at the 7, you have almost no bureaucracy, right? Everybody's on the team, everybody's running. Once you get past like 15, bureaucracy starts to set in and all these different personalities. So I think you're right. 50, like 20 to me is that sweet spot. I really like 7 to 20, 5 to 20 employees is kind of where I really like to maintain it. I stop liking it after 150. It just gets too big and I don't know people and things are happening in the business. And I'm like, I don't even understand what's going on anymore.
What are we selling? Who is this person? Oh, they work for me. Oh, okay, cool. Hi.
Yeah. So it gets really weird. Especially we ran a big programming shop and having 150 programmers on one piece of software is wildly challenging. And that was probably 10 years ago and I'm still dealing with after effects of who the hell wrote these notes on this line? Like, what the heck's going on? But, so that 7 spot and that 60 spot, and I'm guessing 60 because you have the bureaucracy, but you also have the infrastructure to support it, right? You've got enough, like you got probably 10 people in HR kind of roles that are managing different people and taking care of all that block and tackle, human resources stuff, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we have the leaders. We have the managers to go ahead and execute, and we have like the infrastructure and foundation of the business. And so with those things, like you actually have the package you can build a rocket ship on top of. And so you went through the cycles of like, oh, we have 4, oh, we have 6, got to hire a manager. Oh no, 2 people left because they like the new manager. Let's get 2 more people in here, right? Like you got to get through all those things. And then once the structure's there, oh my God, like you just feel like everything you do has such incredible amounts of lift now because you can roll out one new piece of software to 1,000 customers or one new change to 12 salespeople as opposed to one. So like the leverage that you get at this scale is just so cool to watch happen in real time.
Well, yeah, I guess when you have less employees, workarounds are way more prevalent, right? Oh, yeah, it's not worth the squeeze to do that, to fix that piece right now, so just do it this way. And so that puts bumps in your process, right? Which makes things more and more challenging. And those bumps don't magically go away when you get to 20 employees, right? That bump that you created back there is still there, and you got to figure out how to smooth that out. So,
absolutely.
Awesome. David, if somebody wanted to work with you, who would your ideal client for Aclaimant be?
So we typically are looking for businesses that are kind of more heavy industry, more legacy, if you will, between about 300 million and 3 billion in revenue. So things like staffing, construction, manufacturing, logistics, transportation, et cetera. Anything where you have people, stuff, or vehicles that are in motion tends to create risk. Risk creates claims create problems, and then we help solve them. So basically like somebody who's solid in the middle market, small enterprise in kind of those different verticals tends to be our ideal perfect customer.
Fantastic. And if they wanted to work with you, how would they get in contact? How would they get started?
Yep. So the best way to do is schedule a demo on our website, www.aclaimant.com. You kind of reach out, we'll get you in touch. Typically the process is, come on, take a look at the system. We'll kind of walk you through how it works, understand what your business is like. And then from there, we kind of get everyone set up, rolled out, and then jam in the system pretty quickly.
Wonderful. So if you have that kind of business and you're looking to increase your risk or reduce your risk, increase workflow process, then hit David up at Aclaimant. Thank you so much. That's really great things that you guys are doing over there. Now, because you're a tech guy and I like technology, put the business to the side for a little bit. We're entering Web 3.0 in massive speed. Do you have any thoughts on what the future of Web 3.0 is going to bring either to your industry specifically or just to the world that excites you?
Oh man, I love this conversation. I've been following this. The craziest thing is, I think at the 2010, 2011, like actually looked pretty heavily at Bitcoin. I remember at the time we're like, seems pretty expensive. We should pass. So many times I have so many friends that were doing this stuff. They're like, Bitcoin. I'm like, that will never stick. So now that I've like missed the boat for over a decade, I think my basic sense on it is the Web 3.0 stuff is definitely going to stick somewhere. But I think it's still too new for anybody to really know what's going on. And for me, like it reminds me of 3D printing, but with way more utility. Like 3D printing, everyone was like, we're going to 3D print skin and organs and houses. And like that took a decade to get there. Right now, like you 3D print like gadgets and gizmo stuff. And
they can 3D print the house in 4 hours today. Yeah,
correct. But that took like it took a decade to get there. Yes. And you're seeing like a bunch of big companies that like went out to do it, like still haven't figured out. So it's still being tweaked. Like Web 3.0 for me is one of those things where there's applicabilities in so many cool spaces. I was reading about Web 3.0 like for voting, like for elections. And I think that we are just scratching the surface. And the hype, I think right now with Web 3.0, the acceleration is coming because of like the money alternative component. Because where there's money, like, and you can make money, people will go strong right away. But I think what's actually really exciting is my belief, and this is based on not enough research, is that the real applications for this stuff will be everything else that comes around it that we haven't even scratched surface on, because there's so much screaming about cryptocurrency that no one stopped to be like, where else can this work? And the answer is so many places. So I think for me, I'm really excited to see where it ends up. I don't think that the world has the slightest clue of the full impact it's going to make in the next 10 years. We'll step back and be like, oh my God, how did we do this before? Like, that's crazy.
Yeah. People don't even understand the other things that blockchain can do, right? We just made a huge investment into file coins, file storage, distributed file storage, right? So these kinds of technologies, for the first time in a long time, we're seeing a technology that can step up to plate, that can compete with Amazon in a real way, that can compete with a Ticketmaster, that can compete with all these things and bring a lot of that power back to a local community or individual communities, right? So I'm super excited about Web 3.0, NFTs, VR, AR, all of those things. I agree with you that I think we're 10 years out to really know what it is. I don't think we're doing a great job of managing Web 2.0, right? With Facebook and Instagram as you know, as the tool, the propaganda machine that has been created with allowing anybody to pay for an opinion and pit them against each other is something that we're still figuring out in mankind how to deal with. Yeah. So,
well, I think it's when you kind of see technology reach maturity. And I think what we're seeing in Web 2.0 is I think Web 2.0 is finally starting to actually reach maturity. And we're seeing the maturity problems as opposed to the adoption problem. Like the adoption problem was like, how do you get a billion people on this platform? And they did it, which is incredible. And then it's like, okay, now what do you do when you have a billion opinions on a platform? And first it was like the money thing, like let's monetize it. And then when you monetize it, you're trying to drive eyeballs. You then like, oh crap, we monetized it. Like now we didn't mean to like create polarization or whatever, or kind of propaganda or whatever it is. Like all those things are now happening. And you're like, oh, now we got to create regulation.
And to be fair, Facebook didn't create it. They just exposed it, right? It always existed. Exactly. There was just an easier way to do it now. It's a lot easier to make a Facebook ad than it is to buy an ad in a newspaper, right? And you can do it for $5 and target, 10 people. So
it's the same thing. Cars didn't invent car crashes. Like horses crashed, but like when a horse crashed, it didn't really matter that much because it was going so slow. It was like, whatever. Yeah. Like when a car crashes 6 miles an hour, people get hurt. Right. Absolutely. And then when you have a driverless car crash, it's going to be even weirder because like, who do you blame? But I think you're gonna see the same thing that goes, right? It's nobody like actually creates the problem. They just create a new opportunity that people haven't seen before. So they don't know what to do with it. And then it gets there and they got to figure out how to fix it. So it's the success problem.
Absolutely. David, thank you so much for your time today. I had a blast talking with you. And I hope that we get to talk again soon. Before we go, is there anything you'd like to leave the audience before we go?
Yeah, no, I think obviously we love being here. This is great. If you have any interest in Aclaimant, obviously we're always looking for kind of great customers and partners to work with. So again, if you kind of fit that profile, if you have problems with workplace injuries, insurance claims, commercial property and casualty, please reach out to us. And also we're always hiring. So if you know anybody who is a good fit and looking to get involved in insurance technology and try to change the world to make it a better, safer place, reach out to us, www.aclaimants.com. We'd love to have the conversation.
Awesome. Thank you so much, David. That's it for today's show, folks. If you'd like to join my text line community, the number is 314-370-2871. All you have to do to join that text line is send me any question about business or technology. I'll do all the research, and I'll give you an absolutely free, totally unbiased answer. Get to work.